The positive philosophy of Auguste Comte.
Hello guys, in this video where we're talking about Auguste Comte and his positive philosophy, especially in his social dynamics that can be seen on the chapter 6 of his book. But first, let me introduce Auguste Comte. His full name is Isidore Auguste Marie François Javier Comte. He was born on January 19, 1798 and died on September 5, 1857. He is a French philosopher and known as a father of sociology. His prominent thought is his positive philosophy. But first, what is positive philosophy? This idea is not directly about being positive on philosophy, but rather positive theory is objective and fact-based. Since he was known as the father of sociology, his theory of positivism became a prominent idea on the realm of sociology. Simply, his study establishes fact-based data on the pattern of behavior of humans in one society. On the chapter 6 of his book, Comte established his theory of positivism through historical analysis. For him, the intellectual mind is in process of cultivating the objective and fact-based data. The stages or the law of the three periods are: first, the theological period. In the first period, the theological stage, where the man's intellect is limited and only coerced with the religious aspect, they provide answer by metaphoric use of the concept of God, in example why they can use their reason within the world. This period, the man's intellect is not fully cultivated. However, there's still philosophical present, but it is merely theological because they create an answer metaphorical as God. Comte said that man knows nothing but himself. Therefore, in this earlier stage, the subject of their query is within themselves. They began to ask their existence, why am I here, such as this. Nevertheless, Comte still acknowledged this period as the fundamental accessory in cultivating man's intellect, even if it is not fully cultivated. However, for Comte, it is still the foundation of the query for human knowledge. The explanation of recurrence during this period is dependent on the special providence and the tendency. Since this is the first stage of cultivating man's intellect, they do not have any counter-argument other than the provided answer of their theological rationality. Second, metaphysical period. The metaphysical period. This period is a transitional stage where the man's intellect became broad. They wonder if they can have an answer that not bound only to the variable as God, but it takes the possession of the speculative after the theological has relinquished it, and before the positive stage is ready for it, so that in each particular case, dispute about the supremacy of any of the three philosophies is reduced to the mere question of opportunity, judged by the rational examination of the development of the human mind. Therefore, this metaphysical stage is the readying stage to the critical cultivation of man's intellect. Humans in this stage become rational in terms of their query and the answers provided. There's no special agent as God, but rational in terms of investigating the phenomena around the universe. And lastly, the positive stage. The positive stage is the last stage of historical analysis of Comte. But this is not the end of cultivation of man's intellect. The query and the answers provided is based on the evidence that risky in nature. The philosophies present in this stage depend on the natural laws. The studies within the phenomena within the universe is more on the method and observation.
Fetishism, Polytheism, and Monotheism.
The first stage of theological period is Fetishism. The first stage of theological period is Fetishism, the first step of progression of the intellect of the humankind, the primitive theology, Fetishism, which allows a free exercise to fetishistic worship into objects, a pace of quench thirsty intellectualism, worshipping a fictitious god, animals, objects, or even star worshipping. But let's emphasize, what is fetishism? It is said that the error arises in fetishism is about knowing what to look for, the mysticism of an object, the worship object. It's the primitive, the infantile stage of the humankind search for something. And as for the desired object, the worship object that is found and created, there is no organized worship and even distinct priesthood.
Fetishistic worshipping is when men worship objects like trees, animals, plants, and even mortals, for believing there is something arousingly desirable in a religious sense. Man, even before, is endowed to search for something, questioning his own existence and the dialectical progress of this religious stage of positive philosophy. A question and a quest that man first explored is the mystery of his own existence, phenomena, and the nature of his creator. Monotheism contra polytheism. A prominent belief present in the modern mind, but as much as monotheism is in charge of societal workings present in the modern society, polytheism is in fact as good as monotheism with regards to the needs and the ever-changing social orders. Due to the lack of a centralized religious spirit, both of these beliefs were in fact impaired by there being no foundation. Instances such as an irregular phenomenon were attributed to the works of supernatural beings. The key difference between the two of these beliefs lies on the influence between each individual and method of inspiring devotion. Both proselytism and fanaticism are much less likely to occur in polytheistic religion. Signs of polytheism. The rise of fetishism or fetishism. Art itself flourished under the rule of a polytheistic identity. Aesthetic advancement relates and is generally one on the backbone of human progress. The rise of a stable and a homogeneous and at the same time a progressive society will produce an even more robust framework of arts under the rule of positive philosophy itself. Worship. The establishment of distinctive faculties such as common opinions and a special class of individuals. Festival of sorts were made to accommodate the coming of times. Three phases of polytheism: Egyptian, Greek, and Roman. In Egyptian or theocracy, largely dominated by a caste system, in a social view, the virtues of the system are not less conspicuous. Politically, its chief attribute was stability. And as to social morals, the system was evidently favorable to respect for age and homage to ancestors. And lastly, the theocratic regime institutes a general human progression. Second, the Greek or intellectual society that prizes intellect rather than sociability and domination of other states, and balances a form of society that is predominantly militaristic while maintaining the priority of intellectuality. Third, Roman or military. It is more simple and marked, and its influence on modern society is more complete and evident. The moral development was in harmony with the same end, the individual man being disciplined for military life and domestic morality being unquestionably higher than in Greece. Prioritized in the militaristic spectrum, initially copied the intellectuality purported by the Greeks. The transition from polytheism to monotheism. The formation of a new mental regime stems from the very transition of systemic beliefs, and as unexplainable phenomena became more apparent, the rise of the belief of absolute monotheism. The transition through the idea of fate to the conception of providence is clear enough, as affected by the metaphysical spirit in its growth. Dawn of Catholicism. It is the Roman Catholic form which has fulfilled the functions of the regime in Western Europe, and it must therefore be the single object of our examination. Catholicism gave a distinction between the temporal and spiritual powers, favoring the latter. Distinctiveness and universality are one of its attributes in promoting monotheistic principles. The uniformity of belief proper to monotheism and enforced by it admits of the establishment of a single theological system among peoples too important and too diverse to be long kept together under one temporal government. Catholic system. Varying factors such as status, birth, military disposition, etc., are an acceptable factor in determining their position in the society, especially in the hierarchy. The papal hierarchy, in fact, constituted in the Middle Ages the main bond among the various European nations after the decline of the Romans. Sovereignty of the popes. The rise of the Catholic system consisted of the two powers. By its duration, it more and more favored its separation regarding the classification of the hierarchy. This sovereignty can be more directly tied to tangible conditions such as territorial and manpower. The purity and even the dignity of the pontifical character were compromised by the permanent incorporation of the lofty prerogatives of the papacy with the secondary operations of provincial government. Despite of this, the popes have a small influence during this time, as it was often the influential families ruling at this time. Institution of confession, an all-important function of the prerogative of education. The function of confession provides a stable ground for an individual to grow beyond true repentance and consultation. Without such contingencies, there would be no fail-safe conditions to an individual. Dogmatic conditions. Catholicism had no choice if the unity of its social function was to be preserved, but to repress the irreconcilable outbreaks of the religious spirit in individual minds by setting up absolute faith as the first duty of the Christian. This function serves as the bearing for the whole identity of the Christian faith, varying social implications to ecclesiastical understanding. Institution of chivalry. Chivalry stems from its relation to tradition, wisdom, values such as converting a means of military education into a powerful social instrumentality. The superiority of merit to birth and even to the highest authority, which was a principle of these affiliations, is quite in the Catholic spirit. Three types of morality is personal, social, and domestic. Personal morality. Catholicism justly regarded personal virtues as the basis of all others. Antisocial practice such as suicide would no doubt have declined with the predominance of military manners, but it is certainly one of temporal glories of Catholicism to have organized an energetic condemnation of it. Social morality. In the interior condition of each nation, the duties which arise out of the great Catholic principle of universal brotherhood. In their uniform habitual subordination to one spiritual authority, whose members were fellow citizens of Christendom, is thoroughly forged through brotherly cooperation between nations. And last, domestic morality. When the spiritual and temporal orders were separated, it was felt that the domestic life must henceforth be the most important for the mass of mankind. The benefit bestowed on women by Catholicism consisted in rendering their lives essentially domestic, and in establishing their position by sanctifying the indissolubleness of marriage.